Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am very happy to welcome Brenna Frey. Uh, she is a former Skadden associate who resigned from the firm following their $100 million settlement with Trump. But today, first, we're going to discuss the lawsuit that she and her team recently filed last week on behalf of a former January 6th prosecutor, Michael Gordon, and two other former Department of Justice employees, a federal lawsuit. I want to go deep into it because, as I say quite often, and also all Rise News subscribers know, the devil's in the details, and the details really matter in a case like this. I want to talk a little bit about Michael Gordon to start things off, Brenna. Michael Gordon, an 8-year veteran of the DOJ, I'm going to read directly from your lawsuit. Over his 8.5 years of federal service at DOJ, Mr. Gordon was an exemplary employee with no disciplinary history. He consistently received outstanding performance ratings in every annual review since 2017. And this part is incredible. 2 days before his termination, Mr. Gordon again received a rating of outstanding in his mid-year DOJ performance review, the highest rating available to employees. 2 days later, he's fired. He is also, as I mentioned, a former January 6th prosecutor who prosecuted Richard Bigo Barnett, Eric Munchel, known as the zip tie guy, and Ray Epps. Will go into those cases a bit later. Tell me about the case.
So the case was filed in the District of DC a few days ago, and one of the ways in which the case is first of its kind is it's a theory of the case that we can bring it in federal court because the MSPB, which is the Merit System Protection Board, is functionally inoperable at this point in time. And to give a little background on the MSPB, when you're a civil servant, there are protections afforded to you, particularly with respect to your termination. There is a process by which you are afforded a right to appeal your termination. And what that generally happens in normal times is that the MSPB adjudicates claims by civil service members who allege that their firings were improper, and the MSPB hears the appeal, and they have the power to reinstate improperly fired employees. And so our federal complaint rests on an argument that the unavailability and futility of the Merit System Protection Boards means the federal courts are an avenue by which federal employees who have been riffed can appeal their terminations.
Right. And the Merit Systems Protection Board has been defanged because Trump has purged it, correct?
Well, so there are a couple reasons. And so the first is that there's no quorum at the MSPB, which there is supposed to be. And as you alluded to, one of the reasons is because the president fired the chair, Kathy Harris, back in February. Ray Limon, who was another member of the board, retired. And so there's no quorum there. That's one reason. And so then the second reason is there are so many members of the civil service who have been riffed or terminated within the past couple of months. It's only getting worse. There's a backlog of appeals. And so you have an MSPB that's functioning with not enough members. You have so many appeals coming in. We know anecdotally that many of the January 6th prosecutors who have been terminated, have filed MSPB appeals, and none of their cases have been taken up. And so there's a couple reasons there why it's just not operating the way that it should.
Mm. I want to go a little bit more into the background of the plaintiffs in your case. Lead plaintiff Michael Gordon, as I mentioned, always constantly rated outstanding up until 2 days before his termination. He prosecuted Richard Bigo Barnett, who convicted of threatening Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Was famously photographed with his feet on a desk in Pelosi's office. It had a theft of government property charge against him, a count of conviction because he took some souvenirs from that office. Eric Munchel, zip tie guy, got that name because he was photographed with zip ties at his sentencing. A judge said that Mr. Munchel wanted to use those zip ties on senators as hostages. Ray Epps, the lightning rod for January 6 related conspiracies on the political right, played a small role in the riots. And there were two other plaintiffs, Patty Hartman on the PR team. I think every journalist received her press releases, had good relationships with her. Joseph Terrell, assistant director for labor and employment law. Advocating for these plaintiffs, uh, isn't this a waste of public service that they all tell me about the way, because they got the same termination letter, and as I read it in your complaint, it's pretty threadbare. Can you go into that?
So, one of the terrible things, you've done a little description of each of these plaintiffs, and you can just, these are dedicated civil servants who performed outstanding at their job. There was no question of that. And so their termination letters don't cite any reason. There's no merit-based reason cited in their termination letters. They were really very threadbare. And the defendants characterized it as removal that was authorized under Article 2. That was the only justification given. And I mean, to add insult to injury, Mr. Terrell, his first name was spelled wrong in this kind of one-page letter that was sent to him to initiate his termination. And it just, to me, that just really stands out, just the lack of care for these dedicated civil servants who were serving our country to the best of their ability.
Mm. And to emphasize, the first name that they misspelled was Joseph.
Yeah, not a
Uh,
hard name.
So, and another fact about Mr. Terrell, another basis on which you are advocating on his behalf, he's a protected veteran. When we talked about Mr. Gordon being a veteran of the DOJ, Mr. Terrell, Joseph, is a veteran, correct?
Yes, he's an actual veteran, and that's another category of protections under the Civil Service Reform Act. There are certain protections that are afforded to veterans, and Mr. Terrell was also a member of the Senior Executive Service, which affords him another layer of protections against this termination. And nonetheless, he received the same, form termination as everyone else.
Right. And his position was, as I understand it, Assistant Director for Labor and Employment Law. What does that signal? To get rid of the guy who is Assistant Director of Labor and Employment Law at the Department of Justice.
It to me, I think, he was in charge of the ethics office when he was terminated. And what does it tell you when they fire the director of the department ethics office?
Mm.
I I don't there's what um what can you come to other than they want to prevent someone from looking at what they're doing from an ethical perspective. I don't know what other conclusion you can draw from this termination.
Right. And it takes me back to the early days of Trump's second term when they had the mass terminations of inspectors general, the purging of the MSPB that you alluded to. And that's a good kind of pivot point. The Supreme Court recently allowed Trump's removals from the Merit Systems Protection Board to proceed, but it's a provisional ruling. They haven't ruled on the merits. Obviously, to find a plaintiff in these cases is you have to find someone who's willing to fight, who's willing to become a target of this administration. Does it become harder after SCOTUS rulings like this that allow, at least on a temporary basis, the government to purge individuals from jobs where protections are in place?
I think one of the things that I've consistently learned from those individuals with whom I have spoken, who have been terminated, then brought back under one court ruling, then their termination is reinstated. It's just the incredible human impact of that really gets to me. There's a level where we look at this from, like, the Supreme Court is allowing the removals to go ahead, and then but not on a final basis. It's just the uncertainty for these individuals, the human cost, and just also the inefficiencies really stick out to me in terms of bringing people back into the workforce, taking them out of the workforce again. Like, it's just the incredible inefficiency and cost to people who have served the country is
Mm,
just stands out to me.
right, absolutely. It's a good point to point out the human toll, and I'm reminded again, one of your clients, uh, prosecuted and convicted the man who threatened Nancy Pelosi, prosecuted and convicted the man. And after our conversation, I'll put this up in the show notes. Uh, Folks have seen the famous picture of a man carrying zip ties in the
Right.
joint session. It's their lives that are being uprooted. Let me just turn to your story because you made a decision. You made headlines earlier this year when there were a number of law firms that had made deals with the Trump administration. One of them was Skadden, and that was a red line for you. Can you tell me your story?
So, yes, I was happily employed at Skadden. It was a law firm that I loved. I had been there for over 10 years. And the firm made a deal with the Trump administration to avoid an illegal and unconstitutional executive order aimed at the firm. We know what it would have been, because there was precedent. There were other law firms who were the subject of executive orders, and they were targeting firms simply based on personal vendettas of the president, about attorneys who worked at the firm, sometimes attorneys who didn't even work there anymore. And then I think with respect to Skadden, we were down the line a little bit. By that point, the allegations were just related to discriminatory hiring practices. That was what the allegation was allegedly going to be. And to stave that off, to avoid such an illegal and unconstitutional executive order, Skadden entered this deal to provide $100 million in pro bono services to causes that the president supported. And to me, that was such a red line for a private law firm to agree to do the bidding of the federal government.
Mm. And we've now had some time since all of those sprees of executive orders targeting big law came out. Do you think that the cost benefit analysis that's being done at these firms of was it worth it when they're seeing that the colleagues who fought back have won sweeping orders in their favor and that talent like you are leaving the firm in favor of other jobs? Are they getting the message? What do you think the upshot for these major firms is with the benefit of hindsight?
I hope they're getting the message. There are media reports of certain companies who have left law firms who did make a deal with the Trump administration for those who didn't. And it's important to just highlight, as you said, the firms that fought back in court won. They won against these illegal and unconstitutional executive orders. They were successful in doing what we do as litigators, which is to fight against behavior that is wrong under the law. And so I hope they look at that. They look at those who took the course that I would have recommended, which is to fight back in court, and they see that they won in court. But also, as you alluded to, I think there's such damage to the firm's reputation. I have had a number of law students who have reached out to me at the beginning of summer because they were supposed to be summer associates, and they didn't know what to do. They didn't know if they should go to the firm, and I think that would never. That would never have happened before. Skadden is such a prestigious summer associateship to get. I think the damage, we don't know what level it is at, but I think it's got to be high to the firm's reputation. And in my opinion, I think it's going to be lasting.
Right. One of the earliest stories that we ran on All Rise News was from a Georgetown law student who had created, with a group of fellow Georgetown law students, a spreadsheet of
Caleb, I think
firms.
it's Caleb.
You-
I remember his last name. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. And that's
Right.
really powerful for students. I thought that was such a good moment. People don't can kind of poo-poo law students as not having any power because they're not lawyers yet, but you can look at the power that Caleb and his classmates had in filling that out and making people aware of the issues. And I just thought that was a really great thing.
Right, right. And one of the named source for my article was Mari Ladibashvili. So many students at Georgetown Law
Yes, yes.
working together on this. I want to kind of pull the two threads together that we've been talking about, the um, bravery in taking the stand to leave the safety of a major law firm after they take an action like this, and the bravery of a fired January 6th prosecutor to go public and go forward against the administration. Folks who are contemplating, who may be watching and work at a government job, might be worried about their jobs. What message do you have for folks in resisting the things that are retaliation from the government, or to uh, that may be considering what rights and protections they have over their jobs?
I think the experience of leaving Skadden and putting myself out there publicly, which was not a position I had ever been in before that, gives me some insight into what I am asking of my clients in some cases. Not asking, but it says, making them aware that when they file a complaint, for example, when Mike Gordon filed this complaint in federal court, that's putting your name out there and saying, this is wrong. What happened to me is wrong. And I'm going to articulate in federal court why it is wrong, and I'm going to win. And I think it's the same thing when it came to Skadden. Is I felt like I had no choice but to say publicly and be the face to some degree of, this is wrong. What these firms are doing is wrong. They want to sweep it under the covers. And it's just, it gives me some insight into what my clients are going through. And I think it has allowed me to be a better attorney for them.
Mm. And do you think that folks who are going to select a lawyer based on opposing government misconduct have the major law firms who have done deals with Trump lost their credibility?
So I don't know that they've lost their credibility. I mean, time will tell, and their own clients will tell. But I will say, I'm at a smaller firm now. I'm at Lowell and Associates. I have just been struck by how nimble and how quickly we are able to react as a small firm. Um, when you're a large firm, obviously there are conflicts. There are different clients you have. You work y- for the government in certain ways. You might have them as a client in a certain way, and so you have to take all of that into account when you are mm, filing something, when you are litigating something. Um, I don't know. I think the real wake up call of those deals was these huge firms have really merged this corporate side and this litigation side into a big monolith. And there are benefits to that for clients. Absolutely. A one-stop shop for your litigation and your corporate needs. But I think that highlighted that maybe there are downsides too, because it was reported that the corporate lawyers at most of the firms who made deals, those were the ones um, who really pushed the deal over litigating. And so I think it. I don't. I wouldn't. I said I would say it's too early to draw any conclusions, but I think it raises interesting questions about the future of the practice of private law.
And thank you very much, Brenna Frey, for joining us and for all of your time. For folks who are joining quite late, don't worry. I will post all of our conversation on All Rise News, and the show notes will give a little bit more about the clients that in this lawsuit. Michael Gordon, Patty Hartman, Joseph Terrell. Describe a little bit more about the cases that Mr. Gordon prosecuted on the January 6th docket, and the type of talent that the government has fired without explanation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate it.